listening to the real sweet sound of today's gospel, CCM, Christian rock, and worship. This is thevoiceradio.com.
What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to the Duke White Show. We're here again, and I don't want this. This show is not designed to be like a controversial show or a political show, but I'm definitely not the type to get all political on stuff. But I am the type to just address real issues. I'm always seeing comparisons and stuff. The one thing I like to see, though, is when I see like people's passion for sports, and you got the people in the front with the paint all on their face, and I look at the way Democrats and Republicans, they're so passionate about, and I've seen people say this, like, how can you be a Democrat and be a Christian? And how can you be a Republican and be a Christian? I've actually seen these conversations. I've seen people get angry. When I go to the gym, I do my workout in the sauna because that's where you get the free sweat there. You don't actually have to work out there. You get the free sweat there. So I'm at the sauna where you leave the gym, you look like you did something really important, but I'm in there with like the 80-year-olds. And these guys will be friends for years. And soon as the conversation of politics get cut up, you find like, man, I would have never talked to you if I had known that you were a Democrat or if I had known that you were a Republican. I've watched friendships break up because of the passion of Democrat and Republican and all this other stuff. And then people saying you can't be a Christian and vote for Obama and you can't be a Christian and this and that. It is hilarious. But then I notice, and what's crazy to me is that there's like the Democratic way and there's the Republican way. There's the true fan way in sports, and there's the passion that people show artists and musicians and the passion. But then when it comes to the passion that we show Christ, it's almost like, well, I don't want to offend anybody. I don't want to. I mean, it's amazing that these guys actually call out names, which in Scripture, we say, even Paul himself said, hey, this person right here hurt me. Don't work with them. Don't trust them because they're dangerous. They're unstable. Stuff like that. And I notice Christians today, we kind of tiptoe over everything. But I was looking at the faith, the actual faith, to the core of the definition of faith of what we put in our government. Now, it's funny to me because the Bible actually says that the government will find rest on the shoulders of Jesus. It actually says the government will find rest. And I look and I see, first of all, every president, everyone knows that, what is it called, the first four or something like that? Every president gets older within the first 4 years of their presidency. They start looking old and everything. That's because the stress of what they find out. They find out that, oh yeah, they really didn't start that war, we did. They're finding out all of America's dirty secrets. And at first they came in noble with all this passion. Then they found out the truth about America, and it was like, whoa. And they get older faster. But when I look at the people's faith, people lining up in Washington, having, for gay rights, for this, for that, and, passing the bill. Like, first of all, I want to say something like this. Like, this is the type of stuff. There was a rally a couple weeks ago for raising the minimum wage to $10 an hour. It was at McDonald's. McDonald's, the McDonald's employee got a whole bunch of people together, and they were all talking about how minimum wage, you can't live off minimum wage. And I stepped back and I was like, man, when I was coming up, everybody knew you couldn't live off minimum wage. That wasn't a job that you tried to build a family off of. And it's so amazing that now there's a minimum wage culture now, and they want more money for the type of job. Like, I remember parents, even the employers knew that they wanted young people who were still in high school to have this job because they were able to work the hours around their school schedule and stuff like that. I don't think any employee intended on having a 40-year-old working at McDonald's, for a living to support 5 or 6 kids. I don't think that was ever the intention of McDonald's. They never, ever wanted that. That was never part of the plan. So now there's a culture, and I'm not going to use the word losers, but that's exactly what I'm thinking, so I'm going to cover up with another word, like people who didn't get it. I'll say that. People who didn't get it. People who didn't get it, like this, listen, I want to say this. there is no way you live in America and maybe they didn't teach the message of Christ to you. That's a big possibility because of the lack of evangelism. But there is no way that no one, it's in the movies, it's everywhere. Somebody told you how important education was. Somebody did. You know, and here's the problem. We live our lives in like fragmented thinking, right? So the school system is the school system. It doesn't matter if the teachers liked you or not or whatever, right? You have this opportunity to get an education. And if you start running out, you know, getting a job, especially in some communities, you know, people say, oh, you need to get a job, you need to get a job, you need to get a job. But really the best thing we can do is enforce education, right? So we this is what we do, seriously. We are now so dysfunctional that the generation that had the greatest opportunity for education, they blew it. They got caught up in entertainment. They all wanted to become rock stars. And I want to say the age group, I'll say, is like 55 and down. This generation, pretty much the core of this generation, wanted to be, you know, rock stars, wanted to be actors and actresses. And we were very passionate, but we didn't have a lot of common sense. And what ended up happening was we fell on our faces with low-income jobs because we had a low standard. You know what I mean? We had a low standard. A bunch of people, we started having kids way too early. We really cut off our own, you know, circulation, basically. We tied our own hands by foolishness, and we were kind of bound by that. And so now there's a generation, I'll even put it down like, you know, in the 90s, you know, that was really, we were exploring technology. We were doing everything but taking advantage of the educational opportunities that we really had handed to us. It was so much, I remember it was so much focus on fitting in, so much focus on being cool. And you know, that's when all the teen pregnancies, all of that stuff started really coming up like never before. It all really manifested in the 90s. And so now we have a very ignorant and insecure generation. And so now they're trying to force people. Now I'm not a Republican and I'm not a Democrat. I'm not even a liberal. I'm just me. And I just know what the truth is. I follow the truth. Now check this out. Now hear what I'm saying. I know you're probably all already ticked off and all mad right now, but hear what I'm saying. Because the generation did not take advantage of education when they were younger, and because they were such bullheaded people when they were younger, it has played out into our adult life now. What this means now is because we love to tell our children we do our best, but we're not. We're not. We're just not. Like the best is not you dealing with the fact that you only have a high school diploma and then trying to raise your children with only your high school diploma. And, you know, you have the opportunity to go back to college, but you don't because you have kids. That's not doing your best. You have to go ahead and add the stress. If you want to call it stress, it's you don't realize that the life you're living right now without an education, that is the stress. So you can't then turn around and say, well, I don't want to try to go to school too and add stress to my life. No, going to school, yes, it's not easy, but it's not stress. That's a solution. And sometimes we can be so far down that the solution can look like a problem. Because you can become used to dysfunction. And that's what we've done. We've created a culture that is used to dysfunction now. And so now we want the corporations such as McDonald's and things like that to pay us more for doing nothing. They're doing the same. I can't even imagine asking somebody for $10 an hour to flip a burger. I fix my computer for $10 an hour. I get that. That makes sense. To me, that's a discount because these guys would charge like $60 an hour to come out, fix your computer. Knowledge is power. Knowledge gives you asking power. But your technique on flipping a burger, I mean, and I want to show you, look at this result. This is the result. The $10 that everyone pays that, guess what those business owners are going to do? They're going to say, okay, we'll pay you the $10 because we need employees. The prices for everything goes up. So now you hardworking American, you hardworking Russian, you hardworking, Chinaman, you hardworking African. Now you will have to pay more to feed your family because a bunch of people that did not want to take advantage of education are asking for more money and our government wants to give it to them to shut them up. Now what's funny is most people only halfway read the news or listen to what they're actually saying. They are going to pass that minimum wage goes up, but not for everyday people, not for those people that I was just talking about, just federal workers. We'll be right back. I want to annoy you some more.
You're listening to the real sweet sound of today's gospel. CCM, Christian rock, and worship. This is thevoiceradio.com.
All right, so we're back. And I'm pretty sure that you guys are kind of steamed up, like, you can't say that and you can't say this. Yes, I can, because listen. All right, I know that in the minority community there was a lot of resistance in the past and things like that. You know, the damage that coming from a minority in America, especially coming through slavery, a lot of immigrants came over here by choice. What is significant about the black community is the black community came here, you know, through slavery. All right, now, I want to say that none of that actually matters. It's a matter of the faith that we invest in it that creates the reality. So if you think about it, when things were not equal and when the civil rights movement had not taken place, people's rights were being oppressed. That is a logical reason why things were held back, where people couldn't advance because they were absolutely being oppressed. That's what's so sad about oppression. The people were being oppressed. But even through the oppression, people still found a way to get education. And when you look at the acceleration of that I'll say 50, 60 generation, they really accelerated because they valued education. Because the secret was, if we can get the education of success. They weren't saying the education of the white man. They were talking about the principles of success. It wasn't. I know this is some of the stupid things that people believe. You know, they say things like, "Oh, you talk proper. You talk like a white man." Do not give, you know, any race that much power over you where you think that a certain, like, when you start comparing right to being white, you have an issue. When you start comparing the right way to the white way, that means that the slave masters did a good job on your family. That means that they really they really did a job. That is the biggest slave mentality thing you could ever say is, "Oh, you do things the white man's way." Because it's the right way. Like, I don't care if you're white. I don't care if you're red. When I jump off a building, I'll never go up. I'm always going to come down. Gravity is a principle. It's not something that white people discovered and established. There is no patent on gravity. Well, not yet. Somebody's going to figure it out. But there's no patent on gravity. Okay? There's no patent on gravity. So no one is ever going to just jump up and, you know, and that's what I'm saying. There's people who don't believe in God. People who don't believe in Jesus. Why? Because that's the white man's God. Like, did you really just go there with it? Like, do you know how silly that sounds? Stupid stuff that people believe. And matter of fact, I want to do a whole segment, not a whole segment, but I'm going to have a section in the different shows called the stupid things that people believe. And I'm going to go there with it. But the point is, I want to get back to where I'm talking about, because the issue is, if you think about it, if you really think about every time we give a foolish person power, they do foolish things with that power. All right. So if there's a person who has denied education, every time you reward bad behavior, you are investing in self-destructive behavior. Every time you reward dysfunctional behavior, dysfunctional thinking, you are empowering dysfunction. So if you have the same education that you had in high school, think about all the cultural trends and things like that. Now, if a person, now I don't care. Listen, life is fair. It's complicated, but it's fair. And I tell people all the time, there's two types of people. There's people who think, and there's people who think things through. So you can think you want to start a family with working at McDonald's. You can think you want to start a family. You can think that. But if you think things through, you realize that's probably not a good idea. Not because money is so important, but because the type of money you need to raise a productive family. Now people who think, yeah, you can have a family, but what kind of family is it going to be? is going to be one of them weird families that just do nothing but fuss and fight and tear each other down and talk about I love you and I did my best to raise you? Or is it going to be a family where there's honor and respect and wisdom and the children can come back and it's a resourceful family and they leave inheritance for their children? See, there's a whole different side of thinking things through. And thinking things through, it allows you to see things before you did it. There's wisdom and there's so much projection and progress. And, you can still set goals. There's goal settings and all that stuff. But look at the fool. The fool messes around all through school and then wants people, the same way they want people to do their homework for them, the same way they come back and tell their parents that my teacher didn't like me and that's why I'm doing bad, or the same way they choose to throw away their education because they say things like, my dad wasn't there for me, or I'm stressed out, my mom wasn't there for me. All the excuses, even if they were adopted, whatever the excuse is, listen, the most valuable thing that we can give people besides the word of God is an education. Because at least, even if they're going to hell, at least they can go to hell with an education and have a successful life. Maybe they never will listen to the message of Christ. But with an education, your children can actually enjoy something in life. You know what I mean? And I'm telling you this because this is what ends up happening. When you get what's going on with the whole minimum wage thing, the government is taking care of its own. They're saying they're going to approve the minimum wage watch this, for government, for federal contractors. So that's like, say, for janitors who clean the floor of government buildings, they're government contractors. Their minimum wage is going to be raised up to 10, but not McDonald's worker. So the people that started the fight, these minimum wage workers at McDonald's, the government heard their voices because they had their rallies and they put out their passion. And the government's like, that's a good idea for our employees. That's a good idea, but not for everyday people, because they know the real gift that everyday people are getting is knowledge. The real gift, the government is not, come on, the government, yeah, they respond when people get mad and stuff like that. But the government actually knows that as long as they're offering a quality education, nobody has the right to complain about anything. There are children across the world that cannot afford to go to middle school. There are children around the world that can't. So did you know that if you make, I believe it's you, if you make $20,000 a year, you are part of the 20, you are in the top 20 wealthiest people in the world. Like, as far as globally, if you make $20,000 a year, you are actually in the top percentage, like the top 20% of wealth in the world. Like that's how blessed America is, where a person who flips burgers can bring in $15,000, $20,000 a year. And they don't even have an idea that most people in the world don't make $20,000 a year. And that would mean, like, if you make $3,000 a year, you're still like in the top 10% of the wealthiest people in the world. That's serious. You want to talk about a minority? The true minority is people who do things the right way. People who obey good business principles and become billionaires. Jesus said this. He said you can gain the whole world and lose your soul, right? He said that. What that also means is that you can gain the whole world and not lose your soul. So Christians, I want to tell you that, yes, operate in faith, trust God with everything, but also take advantage of the resources that God uses, that God gives us, such as education. What's wrong with being a billionaire believer who also blesses a bunch of people? What's wrong with being a billionaire believer? What's wrong with, and I'm not going to go into the prosperity preaching, because I'm not saying that it's all about prosperity, but what I'm saying is that we don't go out of our way to deny it and be stupid but spiritual. That doesn't make any sense. Doesn't make any sense whatsoever. By the way, I want to remind everybody, to get the Strong's expanded exhaustive concordance on the Bible, it breaks everything down from Hebrew to Greek, word translation, so you can get the true meanings of the Word of God. And the reason why I took the moment to say that is because Jesus said, whom the Son sets free is free indeed. And most people have no idea how to become free indeed. Indeed free means this: to be lacking nothing in any dimension. When he says he wants you to be indeed free, it means that, okay, watch, there's a difference between a free man and a runaway slave. Now, let's say I meet this guy. He's a runaway slave, and I've been free my whole life. And I'm like, hey, let's go to this restaurant. And it's a bunch of slave masters in that restaurant. And he starts to panic because he doesn't know if one of those slave masters are going to recognize him. He doesn't know. No, we can't go there. But me, I can walk in there. Hey, Frank. Hey, Dave. Hey, Leroy. You know, Leroy was in case there were some black slave owners back there. You know how we get down. But, you know, we go back there. All this. But the runaway slave would be nervous every time they got around a slave master. But a free man has nothing to fear because they know what they can do. A free man has an identity in freedom, a connection in freedom. A runaway slave has just escaped momentarily slavery with the possibility of always coming back to slavery. And so the free man is like, has nothing to fear, but the runaway slave, that master can come back at any time and pull him back in. So if you are a slave to perversion, it can bring you back anytime it wants to if you're a runaway slave. But a free man, someone who's been freed from perversion, is actually freed from perversion. They won't go back to it even if it presented itself. Even if it showed up, they wouldn't go back to it. But a runaway slave would fall into it. And they're the ones that make all the excuses. So say if you are free from being, the difference between being in poverty to being wealthy. Being wealthy, you're not lacking in any financial dimension. Okay, you may be lacking in character, you may be lacking in spirituality, you may be not lacking but as far as the financial dimension, you're not lacking in. So here's what happens. When a person is a runaway slave and you have that runaway slave mindset, you'll always waste opportunities because opportunities become a threat to you because you don't know if that's slavery again. Because guess what? Freedom looks like slavery sometimes. The reason why is because freedom has responsibility. Freedom has accountability. Freedom has principles that you follow to do things the right way. There's places you don't go because you have freedom. There's things you don't go because you have free. See, people think that freedom means you can go anywhere, how you want to. You know what I mean? But freedom really gives you the ability to do things the right way. That's what freedom, that's the beauty with freedom. The slave mentality only allows you to do what you believe or to do what you're told to believe and do. And you won't ever travel outside of their boundaries. I'll give you an example. Say if you were born in the hood and all you know is the hood stuff. So your definition, you'll define life. The entirety of the world, you'll define it from a 12-block radius. So you'll go up to somebody and say, man, life is hard. But somebody in that same neighborhood that has a free mentality and not a slave mentality, they'll come up to you and be like, I don't know what you're talking about. I went to college. I'm a lawyer. I got 4 great kids. I got a beautiful wife. And y'all can be the same age, went to the same school. But because that person defined life from a 12-block radius, and they constructed their life around the boundaries of their limitations, and this other person had a free mentality and saw the truth about life and had a good perspective and a good worldview, then guess what happens? 2 people from the same neighborhood, from the same school, next door, can have 2 different mindsets and go in 2 different directions. And nothing ever changes about that. That doesn't change when you get older. It doesn't. There are women out there who are single mothers of 4 and 5 kids who see that things are not going to get better. And so they go to school. But then there's another group of women out there that will see things are not going to get better and they give up and they turn to alcohol. They turn to drugs. They turn to prostitution. Well, I got to feed my kids, so I'm going to be a stripper. What? What? Or I'm going to have to prostitute myself out because I got to feed my kids. Listen, when people say things like, you got to do what you got to do to take care of your family, that means in the boundaries of what makes sense. And what I'm saying is that we live in a generation where I'm telling you right now, this is how the government plays everybody. And I'm going to leave it alone after this. The government plays everybody because they know the majority of people in the country are foolish. And what they do is they play everybody on their foolishness, get everybody to vote for them, because they make everyone think, since they have power, they make everyone think, we will side with your foolishness. Everyone goes, yay, and places a vote. And then when they get in office, they do what actually makes sense. and they flip on everybody, and then everyone complains. But because everyone's foolish, so many people are foolish, they just fall into it every time. I would like for you guys to do this one thing for me. Stop depending on the government as if it's God, because the government needs God. They're just people too. And as a matter of fact, the government needs you. So if you think about it, you are the power to the government, but you don't know it. You can overthrow the government. And I'm not saying we need to overthrow the government, but I am saying that we need to do something. We need to become better people, and then that will make the government better. We'll be right back.
You're listening to the real sweet sound of today's gospel. CCM, Christian rock, and worship. This is thevoiceradio.com.
All right, we're back. Now that I know you have a splitting headache, just your brain is like, what is he saying? Did he just say that most people in America are fools? Well, yeah, I did. This is what makes people foolish. What makes people foolish is when they cut themselves short and expect to get the fullness out of life. And if there's an area in your life, now listen, I'm trying to help you be better and help you become a better person, because I too am an everyday American, and I too have been very foolish with my own life. What defines you as a fool is if you know in the core of yourself, you have cut yourself short, you have spoken negatively against yourself, you really didn't do your best, but you expect everything in life to play out the way you want it. That does make you foolish. So I want you to know, now I want to tell you how to come out of that foolishness. You connect with the Word of God. Listen, I want to show you something. When Jesus was walking amongst us, he didn't address the politics. He dealt with people on a human level. It wasn't about the Romans and the Jews and this and that. He dealt with humanity, because you got to understand something. Sin did not create Democrats. Sin did not create Republicans. Sin created dysfunction in humanity. So Jesus came to correct a dysfunction in humanity, and that was sin. And I love the fact that the Bible says that every law, every instruction that God put out, it hinged upon love. It hinged upon love. So there's no possible way that the things that I'm going to say, especially on this show, you're going to get offended. But it's almost like saying, like, if your eye's crooked and someone says, hey man, your eye's crooked, are you going to do something about that? It's not saying that it's not saying that you're crazy or anything like that, but it is saying that, hey, you can get that fixed. Like, so don't get offended if somebody's presenting something that has a solution. If you want a better life, there is a way. If you want a better life, there is a way. There's people who will, I want to show you something. There's people who will put up with all types of dysfunction in their life, trying to have a better life, and they think putting up with the dysfunction is how they're going to eventually, things are going to turn around. It doesn't work like that. Nothing in your life will turn around until you start to know better, when you start to learn better, when you say enough is enough. A friend of mine always says, you got to stop the bleeding. You got to stop the bleeding. And it hurts to stop the bleeding, because you can get used to the bleeding, and it hurts to stop the bleeding. I want you to think about the woman with the issue of blood. She could have, technically, because of her particular issue in that day, it was actually illegal for her to be around groups of people. She was so focused on her getting her healing that she actually walked through those groups of people illegally. And she went and technically broke the law to get virtue from the Lord, which means her connecting, truly connecting. I don't want you crazy people out there, I don't want you to go out and do stupid stuff and then be like, I'm connected with Jesus and I'm above the law. But when you connect to truth, truth is above the law. It absolutely is. Truth is above the law. Because when you operate in truth and the law comes to see if it is truth, it cannot accuse you, because you have truth. When you have truth, you are unaccusable. The only thing that can happen is that people lie on you. That's the only thing that can happen. So this woman walks through the crowd illegally, and she takes virtue from Jesus, and he responded, "Who touched me? I felt virtue leave me." So this was a true connection. Now what ends up happening is this. Her issue was dealt with because she was so determined. And wherever you're bleeding at financially, if you're bleeding emotionally, if you're bleeding, wherever you're bleeding, you've got to be determined. You've got to have the bravery to go forth, and you have to have the bravery to go through. You have to have the ability to ignore all the things that are around you, all the people that are around you, and you've got to be able to get a connection to God. I don't care if you have a family of atheists. I don't care what the situation is. You've got to know that this is your opportunity to do something with your life and to make something really change in your life. And this is why it says the truth will make you free. Because the reality is, he says, first you must become a disciple. Then you will know the truth. Then the truth will make you free. So no, this woman had an issue. Now, what happens sometimes in life, and this is where disciples can really come from. The disciples were disciples because they walked with Jesus in 3 years, right? A lot of people think that it was just because Jesus was teaching them that's how they became disciples. But the truth is, life can make you a disciple of Christ. Because you can learn very valuable lessons. Like this woman with the issue of blood, she already knows how evil people can be because of the way she was treated. She already knows how crazy people can be or how people's problems can be because she had a problem, and she doesn't try to be self-centered, but she had an issue that made her self-centered. She was going to doctors. She went to witch doctors. She was desperate. So she understands desperation. She had life lessons that could make her a very good disciple if she truly connected to God. And she presses through. So we know that pressing can also cause you to become a disciple. And she takes virtue from Jesus, which that also can make you a disciple. Because the connection actually happened. So when you connect to Jesus, you can become a disciple by the drama that you go through in your own life. You don't have to settle for your issue. So whatever you're bleeding with, if you're bleeding integrity, if you have an issue with integrity, if you have an issue with patience, dun, 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 if you have an issue with wisdom, you can go to Jesus and get virtue, and he can heal that issue. But you've got to stop saying things like, oh, this is just the way I am, or that's my life, or I got to put up with this. That's why I cannot stand negative people. Oh my gosh, man. Negative people are people who just believe their excuses. That's what negative people are. Negative people are just people who yap. This should be that way. That should be that. And they do nothing. And that's why they're negative, because the reality of their nothingness, the reality of the nothing they invest in their own life shows up. Like, yeah, you're right. Being negative is it's a great way to see how bad life can get. Have you ever said things like, can it get any worse? And then something else happens. I'll be on the phone arguing with somebody, and I'll run a red light and then get a ticket. I'll be like, can anything worse happen? And then it's like, oh yeah, by the way, I ran another red light after having an attitude that I got the first ticket. Then I run another red light. Stuff like it can always get worse. Or someone can run into your car after. Things can always get worse. Don't ask yourself, can things get worse? Because life will show you that. Because the reality is this. I want to live a life where no matter how bad things get, that my character is just as consistent as God's character. Because God's love, he loves us no matter how bad we get. He loves us no matter how terrible. I mean, it went from disobeying God in the garden with fruit, eating a fruit with the knowledge of good and evil. It went from that offense, and a lot of people say, well, why would God flip out over that offense? Because something new was created in the universe that did not exist, that did not come from God. Man used his creative ability to create rebellion against God. That little situation was a major disrespect to the creator of the universe. So it did spin things out of whack. It's almost like, it's like taking a little bomb and blowing something up, but it can get big results. It can go around the world. You know what I mean? Big things happen from small beginnings. And so I'm going to show you this little offense of bringing in the knowledge of good and evil into man's genetics that Adam and Eve did. It has now turned in from this little act of disobedience to now nuclear warfare. We brought in, we went from just being in the fruit and, God having to cover us, with sheepskin and clothes, God having to cover us and us learning that we were naked. It went from that to now divorce. It went from the garden to to starvation in Africa, to starvation in the ghettos in America, to racism. Look how the digression of humanity has happened. And through it all, Jesus comes down and he didn't waste his time, people. When Jesus came down to instruct us to love one another, that is the quickest way to bring anybody, any situation, healing. If there is someone down and out, say a homeless person that has nowhere to go, they have, they're one of the foolish people that believe something foolish, right? And I'm not talking about people who became homeless for some extreme reason or they're down on their luck, but I'm going to show you how it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter how people got into what situation they're in. If you have the ability to bring them up through the love of Christ, you have the answer. Jesus came down as a solution. Bottom line, where a lot of Christians today, where we go wrong is we start trying to justify everything and be like, oh, I know I have the solution to be a blessing to this person, but I'm not because this, and this. And what ends up happening is those people go deeper and deeper into their digression of humanity. And you have to multiply that times billions of people on the planet. So for every believer that actually has a solution to help somebody come up that doesn't activate, that you standing there doing nothing is actually an investment in the dysfunction of humanity. But if you are truly of Christ, you will love like Jesus. I want to encourage you to read Ephesians chapter 5, where Jesus said, follow Christ as dear children. Do what he did. Be like him. And he tells everyone all the ways of foolishness, like I just told you for the last hour. I just told you he shows away all the foolishness, but then he comes back and says this: to love one another as Christ loved us. That's how we come up. If Jesus came down and told us another way, he would have told us another way. The way that we help other people come up is by loving them the same way Jesus loved us. All right. I want to remind everybody, go to comingsoonjesus.org, get your Coming Soon Jesus shirt, help us stimulate evangelism, help us share the gospel, and live out loud and love for real. God bless you.